Welcome to General Tools. I'm here to introduce the new improved Easy Pro dovetail jig, the Dovetailer. With this jig, you can make handsome, sturdy, half-blind dovetail joints like these right out of the box. All you need is your own router, or you can use a router table. The jig comes complete with everything you need to get started and cut half-blind dovetail joints. The improved Easy Pro dovetail jig, the Dovetailer, has several significant features. It has a clamping bar, a nice wide clamping bar, and easy to turn thumb screws that make alignment and positioning of the wood piece much easier. It has nice anodized finish, make it smooth. Run your router across when you use your router on this face. On this side, it has an adjustment bar for setting your router bit so that you have the precise height for the dovetails in both the pins and the tails. And the handles make it easier to position and hang on to this when you're doing your cuts. The jig also comes complete with a fully assembled half-inch router bit with 2 ball bearing guides and a locking collar. Makes it much easier to cut all of the dovetail pins and tails of the half-blind dovetail joint. The kit also includes an Allen key for adjusting the alignment gauge, and it includes an alignment key which enables you to increase the width of the boards that you're creating so you can create dovetails along a much longer piece of wood. The kit includes an easy-to-follow, illustrated instruction booklet that shows you how to make half-blind dovetail joints and other types of woodworking joints. The Dovetailer comes with a 1/2-inch bit. It's got 2 ball bearing guides and a locking collar. It can be adjusted, but you don't really have to adjust anything when you get it out of the kit. Place the bit in your router like you would with any bit. Lock it into place. Then you set your bit height according to the adjustment guide. The standard setting for the adjustment guide is 1/2 inch. You can't use an ordinary router gauge or a height adjustment gauge because it won't be the same. You have to set both sides equally. There are marks, you can read them. There's 1/2, 3/4, 1 inch. So I'm setting this side at 1/2 inch. Locking it down, making sure this side is 1/2 inch. It's not cockeyed in any way. Locking it down. We put the adjustment guide on the router. See, it's a little high, so what I need to do, I need to bring the bit down or up to meet the adjustment guide. In this case, we'll go downward. When you route the dovetails, the blade will not engage this plastic piece, the adjustment gauge. You want the bit to just touch the setting of your adjustment gauge. I like that. Now that we have our router set to the proper height, lock it in place. Gauge is ready, and we're ready to make our first cut. Now remember, you can make all the cuts you need, all the dovetail cuts, using a freehand router. And when you cut with the router, when you're cutting with the pins, to reiterate, you always cut against the logo. So in this case, you cut the pins with the logo facing this way. When you're cutting the tails, you want the face of the machine against the logo, so it's this way. You can also use a router table to make all of the same cuts with this jig. It's easy enough, but just remember that the router table being an inverted router, you invert the jig. So if you're cutting the pins, you want the logo to face the machine, you'd be cutting the pins this way. You don't want to cut the pins this way. You want to have that logo facing the table, cutting it this way. Just move it through the router. If you're cutting the tails, the same thing. You want the tails logo to face the machine. Place it this way, and you'd be cutting it this way. It's a very versatile piece of equipment. You can do it all right out of the box. Alright, now we're ready to set up and cut the first board. You always cut the tail side of the workpiece first, and it says here, cut tails this side, so we're going to be putting the board into this side of the jig. Turn it over. You got your clamping bar, thumb screws. Take your workpiece. Now you want the finished side of the workpiece, whatever's going to end up to be the finished side, on the inside of the jig. So it's going to be facing the clamping bar. You want to visually center the board in the jig, and you can see down there with these alignment openings, it's easy enough to center it. You want to tighten this jig, make it moderately tight. You can over tighten this if you try, so you have to be careful. You don't have to have it too tight, just moderately tight. Alright. Board is right up against the jig, positioned correctly, centered in the opening. And we're going to take this and we're going to clamp it to our workbench. Okay, now we plug in our router. It's already installed. You want to be sure that the router face is up against the side that says cut tails this side. And you want your bit up to full speed when you begin cutting. So we position the router, ready to go. And here are your tails. The dovetailer will cut a complete dovetail line into a 1x6 board. But if you want to cut dovetails into a wider piece, like this 1x8, you can easily do it by readjusting the board after you make your first set of cuts using the alignment key. We'll show how that gets done. First, you find the center of your board. In this case would be 3 5/8 inch. Make a mark so you have a center line. And when you install the board into your jig, and we're going to center that line on one of the right-hand side teeth. In this case, we use the second tooth in, because after we cut the tails on this side, all of these tails, we're going to release the clamp, and we're going to move the board over so that it reveals the rest of the board, and we're going to use this center line and the alignment key to properly align this board so that we can cut the rest of the dovetails. And we'll start with our first one. So we've got the center line on one of the right-hand teeth. And that doesn't have to be precise because the alignment key will make sure that we have a proper alignment. Remove the board. We want this tight but not too tight. Now I'll clamp my board to the bench. Put it sturdy. We've got our router ready to go. Now we'll cut this side. Once again, you want your bit to be moving at full speed when you enter the workpiece. Now we're going to move the board in the jig, release the locking clamp. You'll see that we have the tails cut for most of the board, but not all of the board. So we're going to move the board along in the jig. Now in this case, we're going to move it down so that we see the rest of the board. We take our alignment key, and we place the alignment key into one of the slots, and that will ensure that all of these tails are going to line up when we're finished. The alignment key goes in from the side that the router is working from. In this case, that's this side. If you're working on the other side cutting the pins, the alignment key would go in this way. Same way, this is where the face of the router would be, so the alignment key would go this way. In this case, the face of the router is here, so the alignment key goes here. And you can see that the alignment key will set this up precisely so that the board will be in the right position when we cut the other tails. Now I'm going to adjust the clamp, make sure that's nice and tight. And not too tight. Clamp our board to the bench. At this point, we're going to cut the remaining sections of tails. Again, router face, tails this side. Bit moving at full speed. Here we have a perfect set of dovetail tails cut onto a 1x8 board. Now we can do this in any board of any width by simply moving it along the bar, using the alignment key, and continuing cutting these at a perfectly spaced interval. All right, now that we have the tails cut, we're going to go back to our adjustment gauge. The first use of this gauge was when we set the height of the router bit. In this case, we're going to be setting the depth of the pins. The pins' depth will correspond to the thickness of the wood on the tails. So in this case, we're using 3/4 inch stock, so we'll readjust the gauge to the 3/4 mark. We set it to 1/2 inch mark, we'll readjust it to the 3/4 mark. Up. Make sure that both sides, as we tighten them down, are aligned on the 3/4 mark. 3/4. All right. Gauge readjusted for the pins. We're going to be putting our workpiece inside. Now in this case, again, the finished face is going to go to the inside, and we're going to use the piece we cut for the tails to align this piece. That way, when we end up with cut pins and cut tails, they'll be matching, perfectly matching. Piece in. Now first we loosely clamp it in place, so we can align it with our first cut piece, the tail piece. So the way to do that is you take the tails, the tails, with the rounded side facing inward. Again, this is going to correspond to the inside face of both pieces of wood. So we take this piece and we place it right on the alignment pins, and we move our workpiece so that the two are exactly aligned. Then we clamp down on the workpiece, not too hard. Just have to be secure. And then we can remove our tails. And this piece will be perfectly aligned when we cut the pins. Now in this case, we're going to clamp the workpiece to the bench top. Use a different clamp. And just as we cut the tails with the router face towards the markings that say cut the tails this side, we'll be cutting the pins with the router face up against the markings that say cut pins this side. Take our router, so it's plugged in place. You want the bit moving at top speed when it enters the workpiece, and we begin. Now, one thing I think I should point out is that the router bit never comes in contact with the adjustment gauge. The only thing that touches the gauge are the bearings. So don't worry about cutting into the gauge. Pins are cut. Nice neat cut, which will correspond exactly to our tails. Nice tight joint. How's that for a close joint? Sand that down. You might not even need any glue to hold that together. It's as easy as that.